Hello, and welcome to the U.S. Green Building Council's annual member meeting. I am Sarah Carley, the Vice President of Membership, and on behalf of our staff, our leadership, our board, and our community, I want to express our gratitude for your commitment to and support of our organization. I've been working with USGBC for over 15 years now, and I am continuously humbled by the vast and extensive contributions and accomplishments of our members. I cannot thank you enough for your enthusiasm, your leadership, your willingness and ability to push the bar, and for your recognition of and commitment to the potential that our community has to tackle and solve the problems in front of us. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome our two guests, USGBC Board Chair, Dr. Erin Bernstein, who was elected by the membership to our Board of Directors in 2016, and who has served as chair since 2019. It is an equal pleasure to welcome our interim president and CEO, Peter Templeton, who is surely no stranger to many of you. He's a longtime former USGBC senior executive, former GBCI president, and most recently CEO of Cradle to Cradle Product Innovation Institute. Both Dr. Bernstein and Peter will offer some remarks, and then we'll have time for a robust and engaging conversation about the future of our movement and the role that USGBC and our partner organizations, GBCI and ARC, will play in it. It's now my pleasure to welcome our board chair, Dr. Bernstein, to start this discussion and open up our annual member meeting. All right.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good afternoon and welcome everyone to USGBC's annual member meeting, which I'm pleased to officially open at 4:02 this afternoon Eastern Time. We are so glad you could take the time to join us. We here at USGBC have been looking forward to the opportunity to be with you today. As Sarah mentioned, I'm Ari Bernstein. I chair the USGBC board. In my day and occasionally night jobs, I direct the Center for Climate Health and the Global Environment at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. As a mouthful as that is, we shorten it to Harvard Chan Sea Change. I'm also a pediatrician at Boston Children's Hospital. The different hats I wear give me a unique lens to understand the importance of the work that you all do to advance sustainability across the building industry, from architecture, engineering, and construction, to development and finance to product, research, manufacturing, to community planning and government. From where I sit, it's so easy to see how important what you all do is, because it matters to our health and especially the health and welfare of our children. So thanks for all you do. Before I get too deep into my remarks, I want to thank and acknowledge the leadership of the entire USGBC board, Vice Chair Lakeisha Ann Wood, Secretary Treasurer Karen Weigert, Anyale Halova, Daniel McQuaid, Ruth Thomas Squance, and Marwa Zatari. We're also joined today by my counterpart at GBCI, Don Anderson, who serves as chair of the GBCI board. I want to thank Don and the GBCI board as well. Achieving our ambitious vision requires the success of both organizations, and I could not be more grateful for Don's work with GBCI. Today, I want to acknowledge that our organizations are strong and as committed as we have ever been to greening our sector, and that we are at an inflection point in our history. With respect to USGBC, the voices of you, our membership, and our industry at large, as well as science, make clear that we must do more to face escalating challenges of global climate change and health inequities. With these unprecedented challenges, USGBC must define how we can best position ourselves to help resolve them and provide the greatest value to all of you and our movement in order to do so. With our core values of sustainability, health and wellness, equity, and resilience in hand, our boards announced last month that Peter Templeton, a veteran leader in the sustainability realm, would step in as the interim president and CEO of USGBC, GBCI, and ARC to lead us forward. As many of you know, Peter has a long history, as Sarah alluded to, with both USGBC and GBCI. He started with USGBC 21 years ago to help launch LEAD and has since held various senior executive positions in the organization, including heading up education, research, global market development, and strategic partnerships. Peter also served as the first president of GBCI, and most recently, as you know, was the CEO of Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute. We are so grateful that Peter has stepped up to this challenge. He has our full support and confidence to guide our organizations at this critical juncture, and we're looking forward to working closely with him. Along with the announcement of Peter's appointment, the USGBC board announced that we will review our organizational priorities. This is a serious and thoughtful commitment, and one that will help achieve our goals and aspirations. The review focuses on 4 key points: leadership and structure first among them. We will ensure that our team, our organizations, and movement are aligned and empowered. Second, offerings and technology. We'll evaluate our current offerings and technology platforms to ensure our products serve our community effectively and at scale. Next, community and partnerships. We will work to further strengthen our connections to the market. Deep ties to the community are central and critical to the continued success of USGBC and the movement we serve. We will engage you in our strategic review and strategic planning to ensure that LEED, ARC, and essential new offerings continue to drive the green building movement. Some of this has already begun in earnest. And last but not least, culture. We will support our teams and community members in their work and will nurture the excitement and passion for our mission that has got us so far and strengthen the organization's culture, and in doing so, our success. In tandem with this review, we will conduct a national search for a permanent president and CEO. We encourage your support during the search. I mentioned at the outset that USGBC is built upon the foundations of sustainability, health and wellness, equity, and resilience. During the first 6 months of the pandemic, you often heard us talk about how sustainability, health, and equity are joined hand in hand. Those communities that have endured harsher realities from the pandemic do so in no small part from the buildings they live, work, and learn in, and due to the infrastructure and planning of the neighborhoods that they operate in. We can and must promote health, equity, and resilience through better designed buildings, communities, and infrastructure here at home and around the world. And by infrastructure, I'm not just talking about roads and bridges. I'm talking about all that enables our health and wellness, such as access to green space, accessible, quality healthcare, meaningful employment opportunities that pay a living wage, and to environments that contribute to our health. We too rarely see that we are all healthcare providers. We are now a global organization, and we need to advance solutions at that scale, whether through LEED or any of the other products, tools, and partnerships at our disposal. I am proud of what LEED has helped us achieve to date, but given the needs that the pandemic has revealed and the reality of climate change, our work to date has just scratched the surface of what we can and must accomplish together to achieve the joint ends of equity, health, and sustainability. As I have said in the past and fully believe, the world is better with a strong and effective USGBC. The work that USGBC is doing to transform how we understand the built environment is more important than ever. And I say that not only as the chair of our board, but as a climate and public health advocate, an educator, a pediatrician, and a father. USGBC has a proven track record of changing hearts and minds and developing substantive and actionable solutions, such as LEED, that push the needle of progress towards a healthier, more sustainable, and more equitable world for us all. Our organization is strong, our community is strong, our commitment is strong, and our potential is great. We must and will apply these strengths to meet the crises of our present moment and the needs of our children's future. We will work to ensure that no communities are left behind, and we will act with the urgency these challenges require. Before I turn this over to Peter, I want to thank all of you who participated in our recent board elections. I'm pleased to announce that Dan McQuaid, Managing Director at Global Infrastructure Solutions, was reelected by our membership to a second term, as was Karen Weigert, Executive Vice President of Business Strategy and Regional Operations at Slipstream. I extend my warm congratulations to Dan and Karen. I now have the pleasure to turn this session over to Peter. Peter?
Thank you so much, Ari, and thank you, Sarah, and welcome to all of our USGBC members joining us here today. I'm exactly 1 month into my new role, and I could not be more excited for this opportunity to reconnect with you and to discuss your thoughts and inputs on the future of USGBC, GBCI, and ARC. As Ari said, I have a long history with both USGBC and GBCI, and I'm incredibly grateful for the vote of confidence from both boards to continue to guide us through this transition towards an even brighter future. Just over 2 months ago, I had the privilege of attending Greenbuild in San Diego, and it truly felt like coming home. While this is my 20th Greenbuild, it was still especially meaningful to me because so many of us came together in person and virtually after an extremely challenging year with a renewed commitment and sense of urgency behind this work. I share this commitment and this urgency, and Greenbuild always reminds me of our community's incredible potential for positive change. I'm returning home to USGBC after 3 years as CEO of the Cradle to Cradle Products Innovation Institute, and sitting outside an organization that you know well gives you perspective of what others see. You see the successes and organizational achievements, you see the potential, both fulfilled and unfulfilled, and you see where the organization can do even better and become even stronger and more inclusive. As individuals and companies working across our industry, you have that perspective on our work every day. And we look to you to ensure that we address our shortcomings and build on our strengths and maintain the standard of excellence that has earned your trust. That is absolutely critical to our success. And I also want to assure you that all of us at USGBC are fully committed to your success, the success of our community and of our shared mission. We are relying on your support to help us realize change within your organizations, on your projects, across our industry, and around the world. We are committed to continuing to improve LEED, which has become the most widely used green building rating system in the world, through your support. Just this year, we surpassed 1 billion square feet of commercial green building space recertified under LEED because you've helped ensure that projects around the world are not only built sustainably, but are also operating sustainably. We are committed to best-in-class programs, tools, and education, to your projects, and to lifting up your successes. We value you as partners as we celebrate innovations and continue to push the envelope beyond what we think is possible today. We're committed to even better governance at all levels in the organization and even greater transparency in how we make the decisions that are driving our products and programs. We know that these decisions about the direction of our programs affect you. We're partners in our mission, and our job is to continue to make sure that we're always moving forward together from a position of strength. As Ari mentioned, we're conducting a full review across the organization through the lens of leadership and structure, offerings and technology, community and partnerships, and culture. This review allows us the opportunity to see where improvements are needed and where we can become even stronger, and how we can multiply the scale and impact of our work and of yours. Over the coming months, we'll be reaching out to you, and we hope that you will engage with us as partners. And some of this outreach has already begun. Many of you have noted that during the past few weeks, we've been conducting a community survey to gauge how we can improve and better support you. We have received more than 2,000 responses already, providing us invaluable feedback that will help us determine our priorities and where we need to focus our immediate attention. Not surprisingly, one of the top themes that runs across the feedback is simplification. Simplifying the processes for certification, credentialing, the entire user experience, and even for getting involved with USGBC. We hear you. As we've grown, so has the complexity of our work, including our programs and platforms. We are putting a strong focus on understanding needs and streamlining processes to improve our overall experience working with us. And that experience must enable active participation, access, and action. Overwhelmingly, USGBC members are looking for us for education and for help with credential maintenance. More than 95% of respondents so far have indicated that their LEED credentials are a critical component of communicating their expertise in the field and differentiating them from non-LEED credential holders. These respondents have indicated a strong desire to continue to receive their LEED-focused continuing education directly from USGBC. This feedback regarding education delivery and content creation is incredibly important, and our membership and greater community can look forward to much more to come from USGBC education in 2022. That survey, by the way, is still open, and I strongly encourage all of you that have not weighed in so far to share your day-to-day insights and experiences. Part of the reason that we're undertaking this effort is because, as Ari said, we know that we have no time to lose and can spare no inefficiencies. We all have to be operating from a position of great strength, clarity, and vision. COP25 and the IPCC report have highlighted the urgency of our global challenges. Like all of you, I'm grateful to see more countries, including the US, prioritizing climate and global partnerships, but we cannot just rely on the world's governments to do this work alone. Many of them cite lack of resources, lack of a steady hand to ensure that long-term goals will remain on track, and many of them simply do not have the political will to take large leaps and to challenge the status quo. But we do, our membership. We've been advocates for climate, advocates for buildings, and most important, advocates for people for nearly 3 decades. So it's up to us to lead. It's up to us to give the tools, the technology, the proven platforms, and yes, the sense of urgency to lead and to act. And the good news is that we're not alone. The demand for what we do and where we need to go is unprecedented, and we're poised to deliver. The 2021 World Green Building Trends Smart Market Report, published by Dodge Data and Analytics, of which USGBC is a contributing partner, demonstrates that our membership and our industry as a whole are strongly positioned for growth. Respondents to their survey stated that they have shifted their focus to strategies that specifically address reducing energy consumption and the carbon footprint of building projects, with the ultimate goal of net zero and net positive buildings. They recognize that minimizing the effects of climate change can only be achieved by making the built environment carbon neutral. This recognition squarely aligns with USGBC's goals for net zero energy and carbon buildings. The survey also reinforces that the business case for green buildings is strong now and the foreseeable future. According to the report, the average reduction in operating costs of a new green building is 10.5% for the first 12 months and 16.9% after 5 years. And green renovations and retrofits provide even greater savings at 11.5% and 17% respectively. Owners also report that new and retrofitted green building projects see an increase in asset value of more than 9%. The study also shows that our focus on the role of buildings in stemming the spread of COVID-19 is influencing choices that building owners are making all across the globe. We know that buildings, by the way they're designed, operated, and maintained, can either help contain airborne viruses or help spread them. They can assist in occupants remaining healthy, or they can have adverse effects on occupant health. Survey respondents noted that messaging about increased filtered air exchange in buildings directly influenced their choice of HVAC systems, while social distancing impacted building design. The share of respondents who rate healthier buildings as an important or very important reason that they have built green projects has steadily increased from 72% in 2012 to over 80% in 2021. The study also showed that we have more work to do when it comes to awareness about embodied carbon. While 82% of respondents are at least aware of the concept of embodied carbon, that's emissions from manufacture, transportation, installation, maintenance, and disposal of building materials, contractors and owners are less familiar than project architects and engineers. 82% is certainly positive, but we need to find a way to continue to close the gap with owners and contractors. We're also positioned strongly here in the United States to make the most of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act signed into law by President Biden on November 15th, which included billions of dollars for USGBC priorities. While we did not get everything that we were looking for, we're very pleased to see that LEAD B was specifically called out in the legislation in regard to public school renovations and improvements, and LEAD was called out in the administration's push for a nationwide airport terminal and infrastructure improvement. We're also happy to see that the administration's focus on weatherization, the energy efficiency and conservation block grant program, clean school buses, and building grid integration demand flexibility projects. Our priorities reflect your priorities, and we're committed to do everything we can to make sure that this bipartisan legislation is just a down payment on much needed investments in green infrastructure and green jobs. Over the next year, USGBC is going to continue to grow and move forward and answer the call of the time that we live in. Future generations are depending on us and our continued work. We will succeed in that work thanks to our members who, by participating in USGBC, make all of this work possible and all of this undisputed progress possible as well. I want to thank you for welcoming me here today, and I'm looking forward to answering any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Hey, Peter and Ari, thank you so very much for that perspective and input. I'm very glad that our community has the opportunity to hear from you both today. And now I am pleased to open it up to questions from our members. In order to submit a question, you just need to enter them into the Q&A section. I'll be able to see them and raise them to Ari and Peter. And we have had some questions that were submitted in advance of the meeting. So I'm going to go ahead with those. And that will give us some time for some other questions to start coming in as well. So let's get started. We're going to start with a question that's, I'm sure, top of mind for many of our members. And that is Levy 4.1. Can you talk to us about the timeline for its rollout, any delays that were potentially caused by COVID, and really the status of V4.1?
Sure, I'll step in on that, Sarah. So first and foremost, version 4.1 is open and available to all project teams. It's still available in beta, and we encourage everyone to look at it and to apply it to their projects. We're continuing to receive feedback that is being considered by the lead technical advisory groups and the lead steering committee to help us incorporate the best in practice and best knowledge that we can into the final version. As we update the credits, the pilot credits, and the guidance. We encourage you to provide feedback while you're using 4.1 that will inform not only 4.1, but subsequent versions of LEAD as well. We're planning opportunities over the course of 2022 to hear directly from you about the direction. So we want to make sure that our members and the users of version 4.1 are continuing to influence the final version, both of the requirements themselves and the guidance that we provide. So please look forward and help us improve upon the work that we've done to create 4.1 over the course of the coming year. And we welcome all of your input through our community forums and town halls in early 2022.
Great, thank you for that. A good follow-on is going to be to ask you to talk about USGBC's net zero or net positive aspirations. Is there a commitment to net zero targets within a certain time frame? And Ari, I don't know if you want to speak to that one.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. So as I alluded to in my remarks, the board certainly sees USGBC's role in addressing climate as critical. And as a part of the review I mentioned, we're going to look hard at what USGBC's offerings are and where we need to go in that regard. As you are well aware, everyone on this session, buildings are responsible for a tremendous amount of energy use, which makes an enormous opportunity for us to really push this forward. So climate is very much on our radar and will become even more so, I would argue, in the years ahead.
Great, thank you. We had some other questions that came in specifically in regards to technology. We've heard that that's part of the organizational review, but there were a couple of questions that were about Lead Online, one specifically about forms, and when users can really expect to see some improvements in that stakeholder experience in particular. So Peter, you want to try that one?
Sure. And Sarah, of course, you know well because you're intimately involved in these efforts.
Yeah.
But so, yes, this is a priority focus and it's come forward in all of the communications that we've received so far. As I mentioned, the customer experience survey that's currently ongoing is helping us target where specific fixes are needed within the platforms itself. So as we've mentioned that as part of this the overall organizational review, technology is a primary area for our focus. Lead Online is at the top of that list. We're currently working through the priority fixes of the platform that have been raised. And so do stay tuned. There are expected to be some major rollouts in the course of 2022 and early 2022 to address those. But we do encourage you, as I mentioned before, to continue to provide us feedback, both directly through the user interface for Lead Online and of course through the user experience survey, so that we're making sure that we're hitting those concerns that you have directly. We understand that within this, there are a lot of issues for us to address that include not only the speed and functionality of the platform, but browser compatibility and some of the larger components of that. We want to make sure that those priorities are all recognized, so please continue to bring that feedback forward.
Thank you. Great. Another member commented specifically on changing credit requirements, the frequency of that, the need for better archiving. Is it possible for us to be more consistent when we make changes to credit requirements, or maybe be just more diligent about dating, documenting, and archiving them? Peter, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
I would. Well, first and foremost, I think it's also recognized that part of LEED's strength is the fact that it continues to evolve. And we want to make sure that through the rating system and the guidance that we provide that channel for input and updates. But we do recognize that that adds to the complexity, because obviously we're working with projects that have very long cycles, and many times so we're frequently working with multiple versions, both of the rating system requirements and the guidance simultaneously. So we are doing some work to make sure that we're streamlining that information, to make sure that it's more readily accessible through our website in the future, but also want the understanding that this is going to be part of our future, is that we're going to continue to evolve the guidance and information that's available for each version of LEED, so that we continue to support the market as they move forward with subsequent versions of our leadership standard.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, as you are all certainly well aware, our community is always interested in the business case for LEED. How much does it cost? How much does it save? Peter, you mentioned the World Green Building Trends Smart Market Report, but is there any research in the works that we can look forward to as a way to help us all make the case for LEED? And Ari, I'll put that one in your court.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I'll take one crack at that, but I also want Peter to weigh in there because he may have additional insights. So look, I'm a health guy, right? And one of the things that we've done and others have done is shown that LEED certified buildings save lives, literally. This is not me making abstract statements. We published studies showing that the adoption of LEED in the United States saves lives, because those buildings use less energy per square foot. That means less burning of fossil fuel. That means less air pollution. And that means less deaths. And critically, for you all to understand, this is not just about saving lives. That air pollution is not an equal opportunity killer, meaning that the air pollution is dosing communities that are the most vulnerable, the lowest wealth in our country. It's estimated in the United States that about 300, maybe 350,000 people die every year from air pollution from burning fossil fuels. And think about that for a second. We're passing 750,000 deaths from COVID over a span of about 18 months. So we're losing almost as many people every year as we have from COVID. And think about the attention we've put on COVID and containing it versus air pollution. We all have a real value proposition here when it comes to health and equity. And that's, of course, in the outdoor environment. There's other research that, as I hope you all are aware, about how green buildings, as Peter alluded to, are so critical for indoor air quality and health benefits, and then a host of other things. And so I think in the value proposition question, we have data that can really support the work to advance green building that focuses on the health value. Remember, folks, the vast majority of money that's put into buildings is not in the building, it's in the people. And so when we value the welfare and performance of people in buildings, whether that's students in school or people working in office, that's huge. So that's my piece on that. Peter.
Well, I can't think of any more compelling reasons for green building than the points that you mentioned, Ari. So thank you for sharing that with us and reminding us that that is a huge driver for why we should be advocating and driving for green building on all of the projects that we influence. I will just add that USGBC is, of course, continuing to add resources. We do have some incredible resources around the studies that Ari has mentioned that I encourage you all to look at on our website. But in addition to that, we are in 2022 going to be releasing a series of case studies that are looking at individual buildings that are going to provide specific details on ROI from a return on investment from those individual projects, as well as value that is generated from the investments that they're making in green building technologies and performance. So there will be some more data-driven reports that are available in the beginning of 2022, and we encourage you to look at those, in addition to some of the industry studies that are also out there, such as the Smart Market Report, that show about the performance savings that is available from projects, as well as the asset value increases.
Great. Thank you both for that information. I've got a few questions coming in that are all kind of timeline related. People are looking for dates, numbers, things of that nature. What is our timeline for V4.1 O&M? Homes V4.1 single family. When are we going to talk about requiring projects to recertify. Can you guys speak to any of those questions? Maybe Peter, if you want to take a crack.
I'm certain. Yeah, so I'm going to say that is largely going to be informed by these conversations that I mentioned before. We're looking to our community to help us see how close we are to the mark with 4.1. So we've been, again, collecting input through the process of the beta that we've been conducting under 4.1, but we want to have direct feedback from the community in some of these forum sessions that we'll conduct in early 2022. So we look to all of you to bring forward your suggestions and recommendations about whether there are additional tweaks that need to be made and how those tweaks are going to help us make progress towards the larger goals that we're trying to achieve. So that is largely going to be influenced. I will commit to you that, of course, we will make decisions around that timeline as a result of that input. But at this point, I would say it's really contingent on what we hear in those conversations.
Understood. What about outside of LEAD? Timeline for return to in-person events. Do we have any idea when that'll be happening? And do we plan to, on the event side of things, do we also plan to repeat USGBC Live? We had some positive feedback coming in from that and hoping to see that experience continue.
Yes. I will also weigh in there and also know that these are qualified responses here as well, because we're all tracking, how things are progressing with new variants coming on the horizon, et cetera. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing is in the context of best information that we have available. But we're hearing a lot of demand from our community for us to have opportunities to reconvene, and we're certainly anxious to see all of you and engage with you directly as well. So it is certainly our intention to convene in-person events in the second half of the year, if not in the second quarter. But the goal is to make sure that we are ensuring the safety of everyone in our community in doing so. So we do expect that there will be more updates on that very soon. It is indeed our intention to convene folks for USGBC Live again, hopefully in a hybrid format for us to be able to offer both in-person and virtual convenings. But again, the final call on that will be made as we approach the event to determine that we can do so safely.
Great. Thank you for that. Next question I have is really specifically to ARC. There's some confusion around ARC, how ARC fits into our community. Can Ari, can you take a stab at that one?
Yeah, so this is something I've heard many times, and it is, I would say two things about it. The first is that we see in the coming year an opportunity through the review to look at ARC and look how it aligns with USGBC and LEAD, and really think about how we can make it clearer and more effective as a tool. The second is that we see ARC as a potentially critical piece at addressing issues that have long eluded our ability to transform the building space, whether that's existing buildings, whether that's providing a mechanism for buildings and places that wouldn't ordinarily engage with green building to get them in the door. And so the board is pretty clear that ARC is a critical piece of getting access to places we haven't gotten and scaling. And I think we see that as a response to that concern, which is heard loud and clear.
Great, thank you for that. And in our quest to move forward on all these fronts, what kind of do we have plans to collaborate with other allied organizations like AIA, ILFI, ISI, and so forth? Peter, you want to take that one?
So I'm happy to jump in there. So yes, very much. And this is building on existing collaborations. We have a strong history, but there's always more opportunity for us to do more. And I will say, tying back to that sense of urgency, we know that the scale of the challenges that we need to address and the time to address them are both daunting. So we want to make sure that we are aligning and building up the forces that are necessary to meet those challenges. So we need to be able to move faster than the problems that we are trying to solve, and we need to be able to address them with the impact and scale that we need to be able to address them holistically. So I'm very much looking forward to stronger engagement across our ecosystem, and of course identifying new partners in that process. And that is part of where I think a lot of our conversations right now are exciting because we're seeing that there are more organizations that are leaning into the topics that we've been talking about for the last 3 decades. And we want to make sure that we take advantage of their new or renewed interest in the goals that we are trying to advance as an organization and find ways that we can engage them and their communities in support of the work that we do.
Great. And I guess an extension of that, or is our community, our local communities. We obviously had quite a transition there. What's the plan to strengthen USGBC's efforts at the local level going forward?
So if I can, and Ari, please weigh in here as well, but I will just say every success that I have pointed to in my remarks and is due to what's happening on the ground. We are about putting good ideas into practice, and that's happening at the local level. So for me, that is very much a critical part of the recipe for our success moving forward, is to continue to have very active engagement at the local level to make sure that we are not only helping support the work that's happening there, but are being influenced by what's happening there, so that we're making sure that our work continues to be accessible and impactful. So I'm very excited. I will be connecting later this week with many of the MLab members and having direct conversations about how we make that happen more effectively. I know a big part of that is trying for us to have more direct connection, which has been challenging over the course of the past year and a half, but we are certainly excited to connect in directly with the communities and look at how it is that we accelerate progress on the ground.
Great. And Peter, I'll stick with you for just a minute to do an add-on to one of your previous answers. We talked about USGBC Live. What about Greenbuild? Do you have any insight into whether that will be hybrid, in-person, virtual?
Well, we are certainly hoping that we will send all of you in person in San Francisco next November. So that is certainly our plan at this point in time. So we will keep everyone posted on that. But at this point, yes, we are absolutely looking to be together in person in San Francisco next November.
Great. And do you think it will stay hybrid as well, so that people who aren't able to make the trip are able to participate?
So I expect that hybrid is here to stay in terms of the work that we're doing. I don't know the specific details yet. A lot of those determinations will be made over the course of the coming months, and of course in consultation with committees and groups that are helping add to the programming for Greenbuild. But we will make sure that everyone is aware of that. And we do ask if folks are looking for access virtually and digitally, that is something that they make known in the context of the feedback that they're providing us, so that we can channel that to our partners in Informa to make sure that those decisions are fully informed.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Ari, I've got a couple for you now. There was a follow-up to your response on the research. And one member would like to know if there's any research on COVID spread reduction in LEED buildings or not.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I saw it pop up, and I don't know of a study that's been out yet, but you've given me a good idea. I mean, it is very clear that ventilation rates matter. Have we answered the question that you posed? I would say I don't think anyone has yet, and I'd be delighted to be proven wrong right now on that point. But I think it is undoubtedly critical to addressing, and it's not just COVID, folks. I mean, this is seasonal influenza, right? So, which is arguably much more transmissible in some ways than COVID, but in the winter. So I think it's a really important part of the case around this aspect of green building that we can do a better job of quantifying.
Great. And so I'll stick with you for a minute. There was a question that came in for some further information on the CEO search. Do you guys have a timeline around that, an expectation?
Yep. We are on the cusp of signing a contract with a search firm, and the search will begin immediately thereafter. I expect before the end of the year. The timeline depends on the pace of candidate engagement, and that's a little hard to predict. But these searches, don't happen in a matter of days or weeks or even a couple of months, as I'm sure you're all aware. I want to be clear with you all that the board is fully behind Peter and the leadership's team's efforts to the duration of the time it takes. I don't look at this as a period in which Peter and Sarah and all of the leaders at USGBC are sitting around waiting for a new leader to arrive. That's not acceptable to the board. This is a time for us to see an inflection point and to act with the urgency on these issues that we've been talking about. And I can't emphasize that enough.
Well, thank you for that context. I'll throw this one out to you as well. There's a few questions in here that are coming on around Lead for Cities and Communities and how it fits into the future priorities for the organization. Ari, can you maybe speak to that?
Sure. So if Don were sitting right here, he would, and I'm going to channel my inner Don Anderson for the moment, which is these platforms are critical. The board see these as critical for our success. We absolutely need to find every last building we can, whether it's new or existing, and find ways to get those buildings to improve their sustainability performance. But at the same time, we recognize that to reach the scale that the problems we're combating require, we have to find ways to work at scale, and Lead for Cities and Lead for Communities are critical pieces of that. We have to use these tools and advance them so that we can get a large amount of building stock and built environment performance headed in a better direction at scale. Great.
And that might be a good lead in to talk about, Peter, you mentioned COP26 and the infrastructure plan. Can you speak a little bit more about USGBC's presence and perspective on those aspects and how we can and will leverage some of the features of the Infrastructure Act?
Yeah, more than happy to talk about that. And just to add on to Ari's points here, for cities and communities, this is critically important avenue for us to address issues that are core to our purpose, that we are trying to make sure that we are advancing, of course, not only the issues about environmental impact, but health impact and equity and resilience in the context of that work. So it does help us bridge some of those connections. You mentioned COP, so I'll start there. That USGBC has participated as an NGO partner in COP for many years, and that we continue to focus our efforts on the progress being made by our member companies as examples, again, of how the principles that we preach can be put into practice. And I will say that is one of the more important pieces that came out of COP26, that we're hearing a greater call for accountability, and that is exactly what we do, is we ensure that we are delivering measurable performance, measurable progress on these points. And so it's extremely important that we're able to translate that not just from the individual building scale, but to portfolios and all the way to cities and communities. So I'm excited to see that we are fitting into that conversation. And that is part of why we're hearing from new partners in these conversations as well, which include many cities and communities around the globe that are looking to how it is that they can actually track their performance towards the commitments that they are making in the same way that companies are doing in their work with LEAD. So I'm excited to see how that can help us scale and build. The work that has gone into the infrastructure bill, just to transition to that point, is also, because of this, we want to have accountability that these projects are actually going to deliver the benefits that are so needed across our communities here in the United States, of course, but that translates to similar projects that are happening around the globe. So, of course, I'm excited to see that LEAD is referenced directly as both a framework for achieving some of those goals and an accountability standard for ensuring that those goals are met. But that we know that there is more work to do. And so we're certainly looking forward to what comes out of the reconciliation package and ensuring that there are additional investments that are being made to help support the type of work that we need to see, particularly as it relates to energy efficiency in homes, to investments and incentives in those areas that we know need to be supported as well.
Great. Thank you. And kind of follow on to some of these questions is what about LEAD ND in the context of our programs? Will that continue to exist, or will that evolve into LEAD for Cities and Communities? Peter, can you maybe speak to that end?
Sure. So as someone who comes from a planning background and has been, a strong advocate for ND, I certainly see it as a core part of our future. We want to make sure that new developments are using the knowledge that we've accumulated from working with project teams around the globe on some of the larger scale developments from the outset to help ensure that those projects, as they come together, are being planned and developed with the best practices that we are continuing to encourage. So it does work as a complement to what we're also assessing at the community scale through Leads for Cities and Communities. How that evolve will be informed by the user base and our community and you as members who are actively using those tools to determine where those intersections need to occur and how that evolves to potentially streamline and perhaps simplify some of the intersections there as well. But certainly very much want to make sure that there are tools and frameworks evolved for everyone that is working with that scale of development.
Right. Thank you for that. Next up, Ari, maybe you can talk to us a little bit more about social equity. Will USGBC place a priority on encouraging and helping projects address equity? And how do we address equity in USGBC itself and our member organizations?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the USGBC board just met. We had our board meeting this afternoon. And in that meeting, this was the primary point of conversation. And so what the board has asked USGBC to do is to look carefully and provide an inventory of where we stand on equity in those domains that the question described with our staff, how LEAD is structured with the community we engage in. I can assure you that my fellow board members are very much engaged on this and ensuring that we meet this moment where the inequities in society, in not just ours in this country, but around the world, have exploded in our faces when pressurized with a pathogen that circulated the globe. So we absolutely see it as imperative to the mission of USGBC that we look carefully and deploy plans, substantive plans, that get at how LEAD and USGBC can advance equity and health equity in particular.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that. Next up, Peter, can you talk to us a little bit about USGBC's plan for education and the promotion of LEAD?
Great. So thank you for raising that question. These are fantastic questions. So I'm excited to go into all of these points. And I really am looking forward, of course, to have more deeper dialogue as we re-engage with the community in early 2022. But on education, this is, as I mentioned in my remarks, that we are getting tremendous feedback in the customer experience survey that we're doing currently about how that education is being utilized and where it's valued. So we do see that there are some specific investments that need to be made to help support our credential holders and to support our community around education moving forward. I think we come at education from two approaches. One, we look across our entire community to see where there is education that we can recognize and point people to be able to pick up new skills and to maintain credentials and to focus their learning around innovation and new technologies. We also look at what it is that we can do to help prepare our community for success when using LEAD and our other products as an organization. So we will continue to invest in both fronts, as well as making that education more accessible. So I'm very much looking forward to some of those updates. And again, please, if you have other suggestions, recommendations, or needs, please we all encourage you to bring those forward.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Now, Ari, maybe this one's for you. When it comes to transparency and the organization as evolution, will kind of the final results of these surveys be shared with the membership? And budgeting, will that be shared with the membership? What's our level of transparency that we're hoping to achieve here?
It's a good question. So, I think at a first pass, we're pretty transparent already. And to the extent that, our finances are public record and salaries of highly paid employees are public record, that's obviously common in the nonprofit world. I think the priorities of the organization that would be reflected in a budget are evaluated on a regular basis. And those priorities, I would argue, can be more clearly articulated. And that's one of the reasons why the review is so important, that we can be clear with all of you about where we are seeing the opportunities. Now, that's a process that you all inform, of course, so these should not come as surprises. And one of the things that's heartening to me about the conversation, these questions, is that, for those of you who are here, what I'm hearing in your questions is that, yes, we have to focus on equity, and yes, we have to focus on climate, and yes, we have to focus on health. And those are pretty much where the board is at as well. Now, I would argue we have work to do still to get where I think we need to be. And I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. And my hope is that we can be more explicit and more transparent about that path. And that will probably be the best piece we can give to make sure we're working in alignment across the communities.
Great. Thank you, Ari. Now, Peter, maybe for you, is there any plan to make the lead review process more comprehensive and consistent in the coming years?
So I think back to the point that I made in my comments earlier, simplification has been very highly prioritized in the feedback that we're receiving so far. And that's on both sides, both internally and externally, because we know that the complexity that exists within our organization is felt by our customers. So we are looking at ways that we can streamline that process as well. Certainly, we want to make sure that that's supported by the functionality of our platforms for the benefit of all users. But I do think that this is one area that will also be informed by larger conversations about where we're heading. What is it that is important for us to be measuring so that we can demonstrate clear impact and show accountability and progress towards commitments that our users are making? So I think in the conversations around how lead evolves, a big part of it is going to be what is it that is most important for us to be measuring in subsequent versions of lead, and how it is that evolves and that our review process evolves to support it. So tools like ARC and some of the other steps that we have taken are intended for us to be able to have other ways to capture information that can be utilized in a more streamlined process that provides the same level of assurance that these projects are really achieving the goals that they have set out and are deserving of recognition as leaders in the green building space. We want to continue to make sure that there is a robust and rigorous review behind that, but there are obviously many ways that we can approach that. So we welcome everyone's input on that, but know that our team is definitely focused on where there are opportunities for us to streamline the process and improve it as an outcome of this review.
And is there going to be a greater focus on communications, both within the community and externally, particularly around clear positioning and messaging?
So I'll start there, but I'm hoping that this conversation itself is a start along those lines, that the opportunity for us to have direct dialogue with our membership and our community is something that has been too infrequent over the course of the past couple of years, and we certainly are welcoming that wholeheartedly. There is an effort both in terms of streamlining the communications to ensure, because there have been a lot of channels through which our communications have been distributed, and the frequency of communications that we want to hear from you on. So it's helpful for us to know where is it that we can make sure that you're getting the information that you need and in what sort of dose is most appropriate. Because our goal is to make sure that you're aware of all of the work that we are doing and all of the opportunities for us to collaborate and support your work. So we will continue to strengthen communications around that, but we want to make sure that we're hitting the mark in doing so. So you will see some changes in terms of how things are communicated over the course of the coming months as well, and where there are opportunities for direct exchange between us, which I hope will be well received and beneficial. But we also want your feedback on how we can strengthen those communications directly.
Great. Okay, we've got a few more questions. We've got a limited amount of time, but I'll see what I can get in here. There's a couple other questions that are related to other GBCI programs like Sites and True and Peer. Does USGBC anticipate that they will continue to align with those programs? How will they potentially be integrated? If you could address that, maybe Ari from your end.
Yeah, it's a good question. So this has actually been an active point of conversation as to how those, the suite of rating systems that are under GBCI's purview can better integrate with LEED, and that's an ongoing conversation. Peter's in a better position, and you all are in a better position than I am to understand how valuable each one of those rating systems are and how important it is to integrate with them. And so we're actively listening to you, but there's, Peter's point about simplification, I will reiterate, which the board's interest is in making sure that we simplify and streamline the offerings such that you all are not trying to juggle different requirements, different approaches, and again, to the purpose of accelerating all of the good outcomes that these rating systems are intended to drive.
Thank you for that, Ari. Okay, great. I'm going to try and fit in just a couple more questions. One is, what is the biggest anticipated threat to LEED's continued evolution and market penetration? Do you guys have any insight or thoughts?
Yes. Of course. I mean, for me, it is relevance that we need to make sure that we are continuing to hold a leadership position in this space, that we are continuing to drive the conversation and to drive the industry to do more. I don't think that's it's overstating to say that there is true urgency around the work that we are trying to do, and that we need to make sure that we are aligning and not just sort of keeping pace, but where they're setting the pace for what the industry needs to be doing. And so for me, it is incredibly important that we are well positioned to support and drive and enable conversations that need to be happening right now. And this is not just around decarbonization, it is around equity, it's around resilience, it's around health. These are topics that have incredible urgency because, as Ari has said, lives are at stake. We want to make sure that we are doing everything that we can to ensure a better future moving forward. So I am wholeheartedly committed to that work, and I know Ari and the board are behind that. So I'm very, very much saying that that is a central focus for us to make sure that we are not vulnerable to that threat, that we are actively and proactively addressing it.
Great. Ari, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I would echo what Peter said. To me, this is one of those moments where you look back on history, and this is clearly an inflection moment for the green building movement, right? At no point in the past of the green building movement, and hopefully not for a long time future, are the relationship of humanity to the built environment been tossed up in the air as it has been in the last year and a half. And so it's caused this unbelievable reconsideration of what is a building about? Why are buildings important to human welfare? How does the built environment, where people can go outdoors, matter to human welfare? And this affords us in the USGBC community an unprecedented opportunity. And to me, the urgency is underscored here, because if we don't meet this movement, this isn't a threat to us. I'm not so worried about the threat to us, folks. I'm worried about the threat to what matters, which is if we don't succeed in our mission, we're going to build out a world that is going to make our children's future much less bright than it could be. But if we do, if we act on the priorities that you all have articulated, we will have a world that we can all say is a world that we want to deliver to our children. And that's not just here in the United States, that's around the world. And I'm not putting out platitudes, folks. I mean, I can give you the numbers, the number of square feet that are going to be built around the world. You guys know this data better than I do, but it is immense. And if we don't get those buildings and those environments and those communities aligned with the great purpose that you all have invested in, we're missing an unprecedented opportunity in human history right now. And so I'm committed to the organization. The board is committed to doing this. I know you all are committed to this. And I think we can do it. I mean, USGBC started from nothing. You all know that. It was bought out of whole cloth. And this is another moment where we can act in ways that are bold and meet these extraordinary opportunities to deliver on the promise of this organization.
Wonderful. All right, well, I'm going to see if we can get one more question in, because this is one I've been saving because I've seen it come in from a variety of different members, and I appreciate it so much. The general consensus is, what can our members do to help? I mean, we have this all challenge in front of us. What can they do? So if you guys could both speak to that question, I think it would be a great way to close us out.
Peter, can I go first so you can have the last word?
Please.
So, I mean, the first thing is I want to acknowledge how much you have given and how much you have done already. I mean, it is, I've been a part of many organizations, and the investment of and the passion of you all has been so critical. And so I want to acknowledge that. I think, to my point earlier, we can't succeed without you. So what you can do is remain as engaged, to remember that the ideal should not be, the perfect should not be the enemy of the good, that progress is never a straight path. You all, anyone who's been involved with USGBC knows we've run into all kinds of walls. People have questioned us. There have been stones thrown. But at least for my part and my time on the board, I know that we are pointing this organization to the goods that we all want. And I ask you to be engaged and to be good listeners and to be good voices, particularly for the communities that you see left out of our conversation, particularly for those who you look around and say, these people have a really important place at our table. And right now, we don't have a big enough setting for them. I urge you to do that for us, because we can't do this alone. We don't have the minds, the ears, the power to create the future that I was talking about. We absolutely need your input and expertise.
I will just echo everything that Ari had said. It's perfect. I mean, we thank you first and foremost for everything that you have done to get us to this point. It is your time, your input, and yes, your dues that are critical to the work that we do and make it all possible for us to transform the built environment. And so we do not take this for granted. We know the success that we are tracking is your success in the work that we're doing. But of course, we need more. We particularly need your input and help us focus our efforts on where we will deliver the greatest impact with the greatest speed. So we want to hear from you in more detail about what those priorities need to be so that we can turn them into wins for our movement and for our communities and for our planet.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both for the time today. Ari, I'm going to pass it off to you. If you could go ahead and close out our annual member meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everyone, so much for taking time out of what is a very busy time of year, and I expect a very busy day for all of you. With that, I will officially close the USGBC annual member meeting at 5:01 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks.